We are going to see how far we can get with $1 million. We'll be starting on round 100 and going as long as we can. Anyway, the first strat I thought of was a high degree Paragon next to Ezili. I went with the Glaive Dominus as it's pretty cheap and destroys every type of balloon. Then, once Ezili is max level, her Moab Hex can take out the bads. I filled the screen with boomerangs and spent all of our leftover money in the slider to make the biggest Paragon possible. This gave us a degree 61 and we were off to the races. We were crushing the rounds, popping everything the second it got in the Paragon's range, and Ezili was leveling up incredibly fast. It only took until round 133 for her to hit level 20, which is in time for the fortified bad on round 140. Though, to test our Glaive Dominus, I let him deal with it on his own and he popped it less than 1/4 of the way through the map. Not bad. But that gave me the confidence to let the Boomerang Paragon handle the rounds without me needing to press Moab Hex for every bad. And this went on for a long time. It wasn't until round 191 that something leaked, and it was the DDTs inside the last bad of the round. A simple fix, as all we had to do was pop some of the bads with Ezili's ability, and this gave the Dominus more than enough time to handle everything else. What was nice is that anything below a bad, the Dominus was pretty effective at stalling with his knockback ranks. Sure, some DDTs could get through, but ZOMGs and below weren't really an issue, which was a relief. But with the occasional Moab Hex, we were able to make it to round 200, where Ezili was able to pop both fortified bads on her own. But this is where I started using her ability basically anytime it was available. I knew the Dominus wouldn't be able to keep up with the bads, especially the fortified ones, so Ezili is in charge of those, while the Dominus handles everything else. This worked flawlessly, but all good things have to come to an end. And for us, it was round 230, where the massive rush of fortified DDTs was too much for us to handle, and there was nothing we could do. But in this run, the Dominus dealt over 500 million damage and Ezili 128 million. Our next attempt was a little more calculated. Based off the last run, I knew bads and DDTs would be our main issue. So we got an Energizer and final harmonic to reduce the cooldown on Moab Hex, and this song will help stall DDTs for our Paragon. And we went right back to the well with the Glaive Dominus. I wanted a good comparison to see if these two support towers would truly make a difference. So I filled the map with boomerangs and managed to get a degree 60. This time, it only took 23 rounds for Ezili to hit max level, but we knew that wasn't important as the Dominus can basically solo until the late 100s, so let's fast forward to then. On round 197 and 198, we were constantly using Moab Hex, and with our new monkeys, we could have it active over 100% of the time, making bads much less scary. The only thing we had to worry about was ending the round with the Hex, as that'll end its chain, and we might have to survive a bit without it. But this made the early 200s pretty easy. We could Moab Hex anytime a bad was on screen, and the DDTs were less of a threat because they'd get caught in the Mermonkey song, which negated their crazy speed this late in the game. Every once in a while, one would sneak through, but we could normally get around that by moving the shell to a better spot. Before we knew it, we were back on round 230. We handled the fortified DDTs just fine with this setup and used Ezili's Hex on the 3 bads, taking the last one out about halfway through the map. So we beat our old record and marched on. Nothing special happened until round 240, where we took on a ton of bads, the most we'd seen at once. At first, it seemed like too many to pop by the end, but after a couple tries, we managed to pop the final 2 on the last straightaway. The only problem is that we had to use Hex at the very end of the round, so we'd have to wait a while into round 241 to get it back. And with this on cooldown, we weren't able to pop the fortified DDTs before they leaked. So 241 is our new record. For our third attempt, I wanted to try a second Paragon. So I got our proven Ezili Energizer final harmonic combo and then built a budget Glaive Dominus. With just the 3 tier 5s and 25 022s, we got a degree 20. Then we spent the rest of our money getting the biggest Apex Plasma Master possible, which happened to be a degree 64. I turned the projectiles way down to make the recording less blurry and let our setup pop the rounds. It certainly seemed like we had more damage. I mean, the round 140 fortified bat was popped by the first log, whereas it made it to the second log last run, and Ezili should be exactly as strong as last time. So I was pretty confident. We made it to the mid 190s before we had to start using Moab Hex, and we used it to pop the first few bads of every round, making sure to not accidentally end a round right after using it. The last thing I want to do is throw a run and have to start over, so I was super careful. Before I knew it, we were back in the 220s. We were still popping the bads faster than last run, which makes sense as we have 2 Paragons, and our Apex Plasma Master is getting the Glaive Dominus buff, which increases its attack speed by 11.1%. The only problem is that we were much weaker against DDTs. I assume this is because our Glaive Dominus attacks much slower as it's 40 degrees weaker, and this ultimately led to us leaking. Just like the first run, round 230's massive rush of DDTs got through. Even when we used Moab Hex on the DDTs, they still managed to leak. So we learned that with our 100% uptime on Moab Hex, stalling DDTs is more important than maximizing damage. And what is amazing at stalling anything below bads? the Master Builder. So we got our main combo and built a degree 28 Hbomb in the middle bottom of the map. At first his damage was pretty lackluster, but I got his sentries down and he started stacking his overclocks with every round. And in just a little bit, he was cruising through the waves just like the runs before. As usual, we started using Moab Hex in the 190s to pop the bads in a reasonable time. What was different though was that everything else would basically be frozen in place due to the Master Builder stuns. Most of the time, we didn't even use the Mermonkey Song because the Hbomb was able to pop everything before it was needed. But this brings us to the 220s, where I finally had to intervene a bit more than just using Moab Hex. Now I had to start aiming the laser sentry at the bads to pop them faster. This let the Hex take out more bads per use, as it can jump to another bad once the first one is popped. And with this, we made it to the 230s, but our damage was getting low once again. So we had to use our final trick, constantly placing new sentries to deal massive amounts of explosion damage to nearby balloons. Between this, aiming the laser, and casting Moab Hex, we were squeaking through the rounds. And before I knew it, we were on round 241. But this time, the DDTs weren't a problem at all. They just got stunned until they were all popped. What were hard were the bads, as we popped several near the end of the track, and the final one was basically off screen when we beat it. But we made it past our old record. The next few rounds were basically the same. Cast Hex and try to deal as much damage as possible. Several times we popped the final bad near the end of the track, but we kept getting through until around 249, where the bads were finally too much. One of them would always make it through. But this is our new record, and the Master Builder did an impressive 721 million damage. Now, this wouldn't be a true test if we didn't try the Navarch of the Seas. So we got down to Zeely, a Lord of the Abyss, and placed as many boats as we could. Then we put all but 40k of our money into the slider to get a degree 32 Navarch. Next, we sold the Lord of the Abyss and bought an Energizer and final harmonic. As you can imagine, we started trucking through the rounds. We have a good amount of damage with the Navarch, DDT shouldn't be a problem between our Sung and his passive hooks, and we should be slightly better against bads as we can insta-kill 2 of them every round with the Navarch's ability. I let this go slightly longer than the other runs, as we didn't need Zeely's Hex in the 100s, meaning we got to around 200 hands free. And here we tested to see if we could handle the fortified bads. Unfortunately, the answer was no, as the DDTs inside the first one leaked, so we had to try again and Moab Hex them down. From here, I used Hex just about every round. The second a bad came on screen, I would activate it, and our Navarch would handle the rest. What was nice is I could be less conservative about ending the round with the Hex, because we could always use the Navarch's hook if a bad was going to leak while Hex was on cooldown. Before I knew it, we were on round 230, our most common round to lose. We already had Hex off cooldown for the start, and the Navarch popped every DDT super easily. They didn't even get halfway through the map. Then, between a Hex and a hook, we took out the bad shortly after. The next big round was 241, the round that our Glaive Dominus lost on. Here, we really only had to focus on the 7 bads that spawn. We hexed right away to take out the fortified ones, but this let the normal bads get pretty far. By the time our second Hex wore off, the final bad was nearing the end of the track, and I didn't want to end the round with one of our abilities, so we let the Navarch pop it manually. The DDTs almost leaked, but the ZOMGs were a piece of cake as they got caught in the song. We repeated this strategy every round, and we made it to 249, our current record. Here, Hex was on cooldown for the start, so we opened up with a hook and used Hex the second it was off cooldown. Each Hex would pop 2 to 3 bads, so after 2 hooks and 2 hexes, we were left with a single bad that the Navarch took down, beating our old record. Between these 2 abilities, we coasted for several rounds, each one harder than the last except for round 263. This is hard-coded to only have a ton of DDTs and Moabs that are set up easily popped and got all of our abilities off cooldown. This let us go a bit farther, but eventually we hit a wall. Round 269 just had too many bads for us to take out. We got close, but it wasn't going to happen. Still, I can't be mad with this score, and the Navarch did a whopping 1.3 billion damage. Now, we can't only do Paragons when trying for a max round, so next up was a VTSG. Unfortunately, we don't quite have enough money to make this guy, so I opted for a 2221 True Sun God in the middle of the map and gave him as much support as I could. It used almost all of our money, but we gave him a Mib, Abyssal Warrior, and some stronger stims to help out. This thing was popping the rounds just fine, but pretty soon it was clear we were doing much less damage than the previous runs. In fact, we had to start using Moab Hex on round 172 as bads were starting to get far and the rounds were lasting longer than we wanted. And by the time we were in the 190s, where we only started using Moab Hex in our other runs, the balloons were routinely getting halfway through the map. Sure, we could rely on Zeely to pop the bads, but we didn't have the money to back her up with a final harmonic and energizer to get a super short cooldown on it. But bads weren't even what eventually took us out. It was the large rushes of DDTs that came on round 209. Even when we helped out with a Moab Hex, some always got through. So this was our worst performance of the day. But now it's time for the classic free play strat. A Sun Temple with a ton of tier 5 monkeys around it. For support monkeys, we had an Ultra Boost, Permabrew, Super Brittle, Glue Storm, Call to Arms, and Homeland Defense. And for damage, we had an Avatar of Wrath, Spirit of the Forest, PMFC, and 22 ninjas. I wanted to work in a Cripple Moab and Total Transformation, but we kind of ran out of space and money as I was saving both of these for an Apex Plasma Master. This was much more hands-on than my previous runs as I focused on using Ultra Boost anytime it was up. This made us stronger with every round, and I gave basically every damage tower we have plus 67% attack speed. While working on this, I came to the conclusion that making an Apex Plasma Master with a ton of pops would be unfair to our other runs that made the Paragons before any Bloons spawn. So I spent the rest of our money on a Super Mines, Permaspike, and some various upgrades to get us down to a clean $1,000. Over the next 100 rounds, all I focused on was Ultra Boosting and flying our Permabrew around the map with our Chinook. This way, everything can have his buffs, making them much stronger. I wasn't always using Hex at this point because I wanted to use as many Ultra Boosts as possible, but our towers were still popping everything just fine. We had plenty of damage to go around, and our Master Bomber was amazing at stalling DDTs, giving us plenty of time to pop them. The only real problem was how long this run was taking, as the second thing spawned, my computer would slow to a crawl. But that's nothing we can't fight through. Fast forward to round 239, and we were putting the final touches on this amazing design. The only problem was that we were starting to struggle with bads, so I sold the Ultra Boost and moved some towers around to fit in a Final Harmonic and Lord of the Abyss. Then we sold Chinook and some Ice Monkeys to afford an Energizer in range of Ezili so we could get that super short cooldown Hex for the late game. And this worked great, as all of our towers got to keep the Ultra Boost stacks even though he was gone. Round 249, where the Master Builder lost. No problem, the Bloons didn't even make it halfway through the map. Round 269, where the Navarch lost. A bit closer, but we managed to pop the last bad with basically every ability off cooldown. And this was kind of a pattern. The Bloons would get pretty far, but we'd end the round with Hex back up and ready to go. The only scary thing was the end of round 271, where I accidentally used Hex on the final 2 ZOMGs of the round. I was 3 hours into recording this run and days into recording this video, and I made a huge mistake. This is it. I threw. We're going to have to hope that round 272 doesn't start off with bads, so we have time to get Hex off cooldown. But no, the first 2 Bloons that spawned were these massive purple whales, and more of them just kept coming. Panicking, I was using every ability at our disposal and spamming Hex when it was close to off cooldown. Our only hope was that we have enough damage that each Hex will take out 3 bads per use. And that's exactly what happened. Not only did we pop every bad, none of them even made it to the last pass of the map, showing that our damage is actually pretty insane. This gave me some confidence going forward that Hex didn't have to be off cooldown at the start of every round, but that was still something I was going to aim for. We chugged along. Round 280, 285. Heck, we even made it to 290, where the final bad made it to our perma spike pile before popping. I was starting to think we could actually do it. Get to the end of the challenge editor, as that caps out at round 300. But if 290 is this tough, we'll have our work cut out for us. We started round 291, and I noticed just how crazy our final harmonic is. The extra Pierce it was getting from all our support monkeys made its song insane. I mean, it has to be distracting like 10 ZOMGs and 25 BFBs at the same time. And anything that's not distracted is getting perma-stunned by the Master Builder or blown back to the start of the map by the Sun Temple. With what we have, we can handle an obnoxious amount of ZOMGs and below, so unlike some other runs, I doubt DDTs will be our downfall. We just have to keep using Hex and our other abilities to take out the bads as fast as possible. We moseyed along, getting what seems like 20 frames per second, but that was okay as it let me use my abilities more effectively. Who cares about time when you have under 10 rounds left to go? Round 296 was the next close call as 6 bads made it to the final pass. Luckily, all of them had taken a beating by the time they got here, so Hex was taking them out pretty quick. I did have to change Ezili to target first instead of strong, as there were some fortified ones in the back, but that's just how it is this late in the game. At the very end of the round, 3 bads were nearing the exit. The normal one was popped and the insides were pulled into the Mermonkey song, and the fortified 2 were taken out by a Hex. The last one not only getting to the perma spike pile, but completely taking it out before popping, so our exit is now weak. Luckily, rounds 297 and 298 were a bit easier, but 299 was a doozy right off the rip. Bads were pouring out the spawn and they weren't stopping anytime soon. We focused the fortified ones with Hex, let our defenses pop the normal bads with their attacks, and the insides would get caught in the song. This worked just like normal, but we had to end the round with the Hex, so we're going into round 300 with Hex only half off cooldown. Luckily, no bad spawned for the first few seconds, and I just focused on using our other abilities that increase our damage. There were only 2 fortified bads that we had to worry about, and that's what Hex latched onto. While these 2 were being witch doctored, our other monkeys were popping the normal bads and cleaning up their insides. But after the 2 fortified ones popped, we only had a couple normal bads left, and the Hex took them out one by one. And just like that, we beat the max round of the challenge editor with only $1 million. And unexpectedly, I'm able to share this challenge. So if you want to try it out, the challenge code is in the description.